Welcome to episode 15 of the Willpower podcast. My guest today is Forrest Richardson. Forrest is a software engineer and a soldier. In this conversation, we talk about how joining the military changed his life. We get into a much deeper scope of topics involving the meaning of life and how to create new habits and life systems. And then we end off with the discussion on religion. I think this was one of my more different and interesting conversations, and I hope you enjoy. What does it mean to be a soldier?
Cool. Right out the gate. What does it mean to be a soldier? A soldier is a job title associated with warrior energy. It is being a warrior for a warrior on behalf of an organization. So in the very literal textbook definition, a soldier is a profession in a military being a organization that protects a nation or country or some similar thing.
Okay. What's been like your experience as a soldier?
My experience as a soldier, shit, a lot of. Oh, can I cuss on here? Am
Mhm.
I allowed to? Okay, cool.
Fuck yeah.
I might try to not to just to practice articulation, but I might pepper some in. Big fan of cuss words, especially when peppered in a good way. My experience as a soldier, so it's been a lot of fear, it's been a lot of pride, it's been a lot of shame, and yeah, so the two biggest things I think would be pride and shame, fear, discipline, strength, and satisfaction. Those are some of the words that come to mind. A brief overview of my relationship with being a soldier. Just for data, just getting data out of the way. I am a first lieutenant in the Texas Army National Guard. I have been a commissioned officer in the military for 5 years. I commissioned as a second lieutenant. I am eligible for promotion to captain pending a few administrative like paperwork type of things that need to happen. I commissioned through ROTC, which was being a cadet while I was in university, while I was in college, and commissioning as an officer upon graduating, basically. The thing that originally drew me to the military was it being this system of strength and discipline and structure and order. These are some of the things that I judged that I was lacking due to some of the failures that I was experiencing in life. My background prior to that, I've always been pretty good at math. Not going to get into early life or whatever right now, but towards the end of high school, I didn't really have direction for what I wanted to do, like a specific profession or career or any of that. So I just took some of the colloquial advice of, oh, if you're good at math, you should get into like engineering. That's always something that I've kind of gotten feedback on. So I went to college on an okay scholarship and studied just an arbitrary form of engineering. Specifically, it was materials engineering, which is how materials come together. So a lot of like polymers and epoxies and things at the, I guess, molecular level, but maybe also like concrete integrity or just anything that does another thing, anything that you build into another thing. Fast forwarding a little bit, wasn't passionate, therefore wasn't academically successful. I took 2 semesters to stay with my parents in Florida, which is where we were living at the time, to just try to figure it out. I recognized that the way that I was living was not effective. It did not have purpose. It did not have meaning. It was a lot of kind of goofing off and having a good time, but it's like that college is not really the space to do that. While also college is exactly the space to do that. That's a paradox. And anyway, during my time away from my full time studies, I was taking classes part time over the course of like 8 or 9 months. I got really into discipline and fitness and structure, and that's when I started listening to Joe Rogan. Over that time, so this is kind of impressive, I guess. Over the course of 9 months, I lost 56 pounds. I went from 235 at my highest down to 179 at my lowest. And over that time, I shifted my major, shifted my focus to start studying computer science as just like a thing to do, just as like oh yeah, I might try this out, and starting doing Air Force ROTC. My original intention with the military was to become a pilot. My dad was a pilot in the Navy back in like the 80s, and he flew bomber jets and was like land on aircraft carriers. So very, very Top Gun type of vibe. And that didn't have a huge influence in my life, if I'm being honest. Like the military was never really like a thing in our household growing up. But that's a little bit of the initial motivation there, and that's a lot of words, and I'm pretty good at monologuing, so I'm gonna deliberately like pause and see if any of that's
Yeah. So
curious.
you got down to 179. That stuck out to me. And
Yes,
how tall are you?
yeah, I am 6'4".
6'4", 179. Were you
Yeah,
that tall at that time?
probably. Yeah, I was
So you were
like,
lean. You were like,
yeah, but it's like I didn't feel lean because it's like I still the whole thing with like a body image or whatever is if you lose size, like other people can see that and assume, oh, you're very lean or you're very this way or that way or whatever. But depending on body fat distribution and your
mm,
so leanness is an I guess like the product of the amount of lean mass that you have minus like the
yes,
fat mass.
very true.
And like body fat wise, I was probably in like the low teens, I guess, but I also didn't have a ton of muscle at the time. So it's like I had like okay definition, but it was kind of like, all right, so what? It's
Were
like
you lifting in that period, or how did you
I
lose
was
that weight?
lifting. Yeah, I was lifting and I was running a little bit, but this was before like I got more like into running. Lifting was some like a push pull legs or like a strong lifts or not strong, yeah, like a strong lifts 5x5. Did that a little bit. There's a lot of bro splits, a lot of just kind of trying different stuff. I a lot of my early fitness was influenced. Do you remember like the Dom Mazzetti Bro Science Life videos?
No,
Do you remember?
I
Oh
think I
my
missed
god!
that.
So there were these kind of like skit videos on like the mid 2010s where this guy took on the caricature of being just the New Jersey tan, just like jacked, ignorant guy,
Yeah.
just like the like bro, just like a bro character. The character's name was Dom Mazzetti, and this channel really popularized like bro science as a concept. It's like 50% magic, 50% science, 100% results. That was like the tagline. So there'd be these videos that are targeted to like the most alpha tricep exercises, and like the editing was just super boisterous and rambunctious and ignorant and over the top, and there'd be like T-Rexes and explosions and shit. It was awesome. It's something that it started as just like a caricature of just bro culture,
Yeah.
but what was really beautiful about that is it made it accessible to, oh shit, here's a funny way, here's a just enjoyable way to learn about like tricep extensions and bench press and which lifts are important, which are not. And it's like got this air of being tongue in cheek because it's like, oh, you're supposed to like skip legs and you're supposed to just do like chest and arms every day. So yeah, some combination of like seeing things that are like obviously not true, but then like taking some of the satire into heart was another piece of it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I could totally see that. The what you mentioned about college was very interesting. It's like that this idea of like, this is your time to kind of do the wrong things,
Mm.
but then at the same time, it's at like a very influential point in your life. And it seems almost accepted at this point that like college is the time where you go and you like binge drink and you don't sleep and you're unhealthy. Which it was for me to a certain extent, but I do feel like, I mean, I don't think that's a good thing. People talk about it like that's a good thing. It's like you have to learn at this point. So I'm curious what you think about that, and especially the drinking part.
Yeah. So what's sticking out is feedback. Um, opportunities to fail are opportunities to learn, and lessons will be repeated until learned, oftentimes with greater and greater intensity. So having those experiences, if you think of being a parent, it's like on one hand, it's like you don't want your kid to be like drinking and like generally fucking up because it's
Mhm.
like that's no, I want you to just do the right thing, just do what I'm
Right.
telling you to do. But then by going through these cycles of okay, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to recognize that what I'm doing is not effective to whatever I'm trying to do, and then use that as an opportunity to reflect and actually learn. So it's kind of like this difference between just doing what I'm told to do, just the doing the how without understanding the why. But the magic of why is if you understand the why, then you can turn it into a what, you can turn it into how. You can program your own behavior. But specifically on the binge drinking thing, yeah, so there's like the physical health aspects of it. Like right now, I don't drink. I'm doing a dry year. I decided to do that in December because I was like thinking about it for a while, and it's like I just said the phrase, "Oh, I'm thinking about doing a dry year next year." I said that probably about 10 or 15 times. I was like, actually, I don't want to be someone that just says I might do this thing next
Right.
year. I just want to like get the cognitive load off so I can just commit to it. But yeah, it's I think a lot of times the negative impacts of alcohol is less of the like physical and more of the emotional and psychological. All of a sudden, this social anxiety that I have, this like, fear and embarrassment and shame, I can medicate that with like a $6 IPA and just be going through life that way without actually having to learn to cope with these things. I can all of a sudden I have this external thing that can help me get over that.
Yeah.
And as someone who has dealt with, high degrees of, anxiety at different times in life, so both like internal and then also, social interacting and fear and shame and all these things. Um, for my own experience, alcohol was it was a solution. It's like I can consume this to try to be funnier or to be more okay with the environment that I'm in or to like numb myself from like the fear. And then also it's just like a fun thing. It's like if you add like one or two beers to most activities, they get a little bit more fun. And it's like I think that's still pretty true, but
Mhm.
it was like a crutch basically.
Mhm. Yeah. And if it was so, was that kind of the synopsis of your relationship with alcohol, or
Mm.
were there other aspects to it?
Sort of. It was for me, alcohol was never like so there's this concept in I guess addiction psychology where there is something, some like it can be like a feeling or just something that we avoid. And to avoid it, we distract ourselves using our drug of choice. Um, Things like video games and Reddit, YouTube, most computer based things. That was my particular mechanism of choice. For a lot of times, alcohol was just if I were doing something socially with other people, and I was in a more social environment when I was in college. I was in a fraternity for my first portion of college before I had that block of like, oh shit, this strategy is not working. And then I joined ROTC and did that primarily. I did attempt to get back involved, but it ended up just not being like in alignment with kind of where I was going and the investment that they needed, and also just energetically, emotionally, like where I was at the time. Like that wasn't I wasn't really in a space to be a good brother. So it was like a it it didn't work out. I attempted to rejoin, and I basically just made an ass of myself.
Did you lose friends along the way?
Sort of. That's kind of a tricky answer. I definitely lost acquaintances along the way, and having a structured social group like that, it is kind of like a platform on which friendships can be built. I maintained some of the deeper friendships, but some of the relationships that were a little bit more, I'm not going to say superficial, but kind of superficial. Things that are relationships that are built on convenience as opposed to this deeply ingrained thing.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Connection is connection, and that's something we are designed, in my belief, to seek. But to, I guess, answer the question instead of analyzing it, yeah, I did lose some connection, and that following chapter was pretty lonely. I've experienced a lot of loneliness in my life, a lot of loneliness and being alone and solitude. So there's a funny nuance here that I'm not going to try to like unravel in this moment. I'm not going to pull on that thread.
Okay, let's get into discipline because you mentioned that as one of the
Fuck
words
yeah.
that being a soldier kind of brought up for you.
Mm.
So tell me about discipline. It sounds like you were at a place where you didn't feel like you had a lot of discipline, and then now you do.
Uh, Sort of. So
Talk me
one
through it.
one one version of the story is I didn't have a lot of discipline, and now I do. Another version of the same story is I currently don't have a lot of discipline, and I will have more in the future,
Mhm.
or I may or may not have more in the future. We'll see. Um, there's this. I'm going to answer a little bit more of a abstract question, but when it comes to skills, a lot of times we look at things as you are either this or you are not this. You are either strong or you are weak. But if we take the time to define if we take the time to look at an attribute like strong or brave, and then we reframe that to being a skill, like what unit of measurement can we use to measure this skill? How can we turn this attribute into an ability? Um, so strength, classic definition, is the ability to exert force against an external resistance. So is benching 100 pounds strong? What about 225? What about 315? Sorta. It's like it's all relative. Um, but there's this. I do think the first step to becoming one of these attributes is to get on the training plan. It doesn't even have to be like I'm strength training 5 times a week, so I am strong, but it's like, oh, I lift once every other week. I am aware that this attribute is a skill. And I think just that awareness of, once you recognize that you can start doing this thing, that is kind of like level 0 of installing like that space. It's kind of like if you yeah, it's kind of like if you imagine like a motherboard that has like 4 slots for RAM. It's like by lifting your first weight, that puts the slot for RAM there, and you don't have like 8 gigs yet, but you can put like a 1 gig card, and then it's like you keep doing the thing, you put like 2 gigs in there. Um, so that's kind of cool, but that's more of just a generalized thing. Specifically on the topic of discipline, what the fuck is discipline? I want to define it, but not right now, and answer the question rather than analyze the question. Yeah, discipline is something that uh, I have, for a long time in my life, and at various phases, there's been a loud part of me that believes that the problems that I'm experiencing are a result of not X enough. There's a whole lot of not enoughness. So it's kind of like a taking accountability of something, but not necessarily in a conscious and healthy way.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah. So um, under the under the umbrella of extreme ownership, that's a pretty common thing. I'm reading that book now. I purchased it many years ago and read a little bit of it. I saw that it's on your shelf, which is why I'm actually bringing it up. There is I'm actually not going to make it a specific thing like that, but there's an idea of taking ownership of the things you can control, extending influence the things over the things you can kind of control, and then not worrying about the things that you can't control.
Right.
So an example that I was referring to is treating it as a binary, oh, it is my fault for everything in my life. Like I crashed my car because I was driving too fast around the corner. It's my fault. I should have known. If I had applied an infinite amount of, or not infinite, but if I had just done more, then I would have gotten a different result. And in that mentality, I would often gloss over the fact that I didn't know a lot of these things. Like I
Mhm.
didn't know what I didn't know. So um, I think that is generally being uncalibrated in the expectations that uncalibrated and reasonable expectations. So one of the uncalibrated stories I was telling myself is that I was undisciplined and everything is my fault. And it wasn't like oh, it's my fault, so I have the power to change it. That was a little bit of like the empowering side of the narrative, but it was like, man, I am really I'm fucking up because I'm fucked up because I didn't do all this other stuff. I didn't prepare ahead of time. It was almost like this inability to reconcile the fact that bad things happen. It's like if I had done more, it is my responsibility to make sure bad things don't happen. And if bad things are happening, it's because I didn't do enough. And that has such a weight of ownership that a lot of times might recognize that to be true. I might have believed that to be true, but then not willing to take on the dot 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 responsibility of what that implies. So that's when I would turn to avoidance based behaviors, so like distractions and oh, I'm gonna jump on Reddit. I'm gonna play this video game. I'm gonna play Factorio for 6 hours straight. I love it. That's my favorite video game, by the way. Wait, what are we talking? Discipline? Yeah, sure. I don't know, man.
So it's yeah, it's about taking responsibility for things.
That's where a lot of my work is, and I have lately gotten it into much clearer terms. Whereas previously, I was looking at symptoms as the leaves of a tree, while neglecting that the leaves are on a twig, the twig's on the branch is on the trunk, and the trunk has roots, and the roots are connected to other roots in the earth. And oh man, there's so much more to what I'm seeing and experiencing that's not just the right here, right now, kind of like cause and effect, and object motion stays in motion, but not getting into that. But yeah, so I mean, discipline specifically, it's, hmm, yeah, like it started off as like, oh, I have the capacity to change things with enough input. I am capable of getting an output. So it's kind of like it just clicked for the first time that I can do this thing to get that thing. And yeah, that kind of started the process of being able to systematize what results am I trying to get, and then what actions do I have to take to get those results, and also what actions do I specifically need to avoid to get the result that I want. So
Did it kind of
yeah.
naturally evolve from there? Did like are you able
Hmm.
to keep those two connected? Because that's something I've struggled with. Is like,
Like the inputs and outputs.
yeah, how do you stay? Because like
Hmm.
I'll have a period where I'm like, I need to work out this much because I have this goal. But then after a point, I'm just working out and I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I
Hmm.
just do it because I do it.
Yeah, so there's some real beauty in there. It is both good to just do things without knowing why you're doing them because there was a reason that you used to know, but you kind of forgot it along the way. And then there's also, hey dummy, shift your strategy. It is both of
Mhm.
those things. Um it kind of reminds me of the difference between discipline and motivation. Motivation is the underlying why, and that promotes action. It is the desire for something. Ultimately, motivation is just a desire that results in action. Whereas discipline is applying that same action in the absence of that same desire. So, like, let's say I really want to, and I love gym analogies. There's just so many parallels to all these
Right.
different things in life, and they're very tangible and easy to reference. Like the best analogies are tangible sometimes. But let's say that I let's say that I'm like out of shape and I'm at the beach and I see some dude that's like, shredded and tan and charismatic and he's getting the girls and it's like I'm attracted to the girls. So it's like, wow, I want to be in that position. I don't want to be in my position. And that's kind of the initial thing. Like we want the feeling that comes from being in this other position, or we want the feeling associated with another outcome. So the feeling being like the emotions or the sensations, or I would actually say most things are motivated by feeling. I'm going to put a pin in that. I'm sure we could dive further into what is a feeling, which is fascinating. But ultimately, I think a lot of our motivations are a result of feeling. So wanting to get shredded and fit, not just that for the sake of it, but in order to get the feeling that comes with being like shredded and fit. Um, and the whole thing there is like when we are aware of that feeling and we are aware it's like, oh, I feel this way. It's possible to feel this other way. I'm going to push that direction. It's really easy to take action. If you knew that washing your hands, for example, like every time you went to the bathroom, if you thought, oh, I'm washing my hands because I don't want to get sick, because I want to be able to live a full and vitalized life, I want to have lots of energy. If you think through all that stuff every time you go to the bathroom, it's like that is a really easy way to like motivate yourself to wash your hands. But also, I don't necessarily want to be spending 10 seconds every time I go to the bathroom to think about it. So just as a discipline, I just wash my hands. Like if I think about something, if I get motivation one time and then I trust that motivation, then I can build a protocol. I can build a deliberate set of actions that I can take with discipline to work towards that, even when I'm not aware of that. Because awareness is another piece that we're probably not going to get into yet.
So how do you know when to relook at it?
I don't know when to relook at it. There's a few. This is reminding me of kind of the difference between strategy and tactics. Strategy is kind of like the what to achieve a why, and tactics are the how to achieve the what. I really like this model
Can you
of
repeat that?
sure, yeah. Uh, Strategy is a process of turning a why into a what. It is creating the what to satisfy the why.
That's strategy. Okay.
Yeah. And tactics turn a how into a what. So the same thing, just at a lower echelon.
Gotcha.
So I look at it as this three-stage model between concrete and abstract. At the abstract level, you have a why, then you have a what, and then you have a how. So the how being very concrete.
Wait, does tactics go from what to how?
Tactics is how to what. Yeah.
Why is that? It would seem to me that tactics would be, here's what we want to do. The tactic is how we do it.
Yeah.
That's correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So tactics achieves a what through a how.
Gotcha.
It is
Okay.
the how that achieves the what.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess if we think of like a mission, a military mission, for example, because that's another reason that I love the military. Part of me loves the military is just how well defined and well understood some of these concepts are. So mission, task, purpose, meaning, values, like all of these things have meaning. Man's search for meaning. Like the military derives meaning from a lot of things for the ultimate goal of securing peace, and doing that through a violent capacity. But that's not the point of this. The point of this is if we think of a mission. So a why could be we want to promote peace in this general area. Strategy, the what is we want to control these three like mountaintops in this area, such that we have the best vantage point. We have the most control and influence over the area. So in order to why promote peace, The what is to control these three like mountaintops, and the how is okay. So we're going to send one platoon here. We're going to send one platoon here. And we're going to send one platoon here. It's like the why always matters, but it doesn't necessarily matter right now. The what is the thing that we're actually trying to do, and then the how is like the actual like actions that we're taking. So a lot of times, if you think of the difference between planning and execution, planning is in the why and the what space, and execution is in the what and the how space.
Okay, so to go back to our example,
Mm.
we want to feel confident when we're on the beach. That's our why.
So we conduct a military operation
Yes.
yeah.
And then the what is by having a better body.
Yeah, so
And
like
then
the
how
what
is-
being in the shape, and then the how being like how
Okay,
do
we're gonna
I
go to the gym now.
nutrition and gym and fitness and all these things. Just like the how is in the details,
Gotcha.
which don't matter until they do.
Yeah, how do we get to this? Were we still on discipline?
So sorta. So it was kind of like so we started with discipline. We got into the relationship between discipline and motivation and desire being rooted in feeling, and then we got into the example of like the beach. Then we got into like
right.
the why and the what and the how, and then the military thing.
And what you were getting at was how you know when to relook at the how.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I wasn't necessarily getting to that. I remember that you asked about that, but I had forgotten about that. Big fan of shooting off on tangents, and I'm learning how to tighten my. We talked about feedback cycles. Like the tighter a feedback cycle, the quicker that you can make course corrections. And I'm also learning how to tighten up my tangential exploration. Can I time box the depth of this rabbit
Go
hole?
off and then come right back.
So as far as course corrections, some things to do about that are to, instead of I am having this big vague desired end state, this big vague goal, and then just having a simple thing to just repeat ad infinitum. I'm going to go to the gym every day until I'm fit. It's like that. That is simple, not necessarily effective. So what to do about that is having some sort of measure of effectiveness. Another military thing that I like a lot is we have measures of performance and measures of effectiveness. So a measure of performance is, are we executing on the steps that we intend to execute? A measure of effectiveness is, okay, if we are performing the way that we planned to, are we getting the result that we're expecting to? So performance is like, am I doing the inputs? And effectiveness is, are my inputs getting outputs? Yeah. So like as far as the how, it's having some way to assess progress. Am I so metrics is a great way to do that. There's this idea that what you measure is what you improve, or something like that. There's a literal like quote, like a by name by paragraph quote of someone that said something to that effect. I don't remember what it is, but anyway, the thing that you measure is the thing that you improve. So one strategy or tactic, I guess it doesn't matter, because colloquially we can just use these two words interchangeably. It doesn't really matter, but we can get like nerdy and semantic about it. I love that. Just having some sort of measure built in, metrics. So am I going to measure success by pounds on the scale, or my bench press going up, or my waistline, or the seconds of eye contact that I make with cute women on the sidewalk? Or it's like, how are we going to measure this? And do we want to measure this? Do we want to do I even want to be outcome focused, or do I just want to find an input? Do I just want to find a process that I like a lot, that I can trust is generally getting me in this direction, but I don't need to be in a specific point? So that could be things like just going to the gym and fucking around doing what you enjoy to do, because it's generally better to move than to not move, and just anything that gets us moving is going to get some degree of results. Big fan of the Pareto principle, the 20-80 ratio thing, where 20% of inputs get 80% of results. And there's also this parallel between that idea and the the sprint maintenance kind of cycle where growth takes a lot of effort and maintenance takes just a little bit of effort. So being strategic in what areas am I going to maintain, what areas am I going to grow.
Yeah, and like what you were saying is so important. It's like the shitty gym routine that you do beats the hell out of the like well
It's
thought out routine that you don't end up following through with.
yeah. What's your do you have like a fun shitty gym routine that you like to do? Like, do you have anything that doesn't make as like the most sense but you just like really enjoy?
Yeah, I do arms like every day
Yeah,
just to end it out. I call it
yeah.
dessert. I just do biceps.
Little dessert curls.
Dessert, yeah,
Yeah,
make it
it's
fun.
your cinnamon curls. That's your cinnamon rolls, dude.
Yeah. So yeah, do you have anything like that?
I like to do a little bit of stretching every day. Pull-ups are a very fun exercise. I like to pepper 'em in when I can. There's some exercises that like are really hard, so I notice a tendency to avoid them. There are some that I feel like I'm not good at, so I have a tendency to avoid them. And then there are others that just feel just generally really good to do. I like lateral raises a lot just because, especially if I'm wearing a tank top or not a shirt, then it's just like getting that immediate gratification of seeing the pump increase. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. I'm doing something here. A little side note: I'm a firm believer on every man, woman, and child's right to wear a tank top in the gym. It doesn't matter how fat, how skinny, how strong or lean or jacked or whatever. It's like you have an opportunity to see yourself at your current physical peak, because that's kind of what's happening when we get the pump. Is it's like that little like glimpse into the future. I recently listened to like the most recent Chris Williamson, Alex Hormozy.
Uh-huh.
So I'm noticing some parallels from their themes kind of creeping into that's just the some of the framing that's
Yeah,
recently.
he said something in there that I have been like I was like, because what's the thing? Why do so many guys like? Why is the gym the
Mm.
thing that a lot of people get hooked on?
Mm.
It's like when you look at it, it's not. It doesn't seem inherently fun.
Mm.
You're just going in and doing these like routine movements, but it's the pump.
Mm.
It's because while you're doing it, you get that instant gratification. You immediately see
Mm.
this improvement in like the way that you look,
Yeah.
and that's like addicting. That's so addicting.
It is. And the pump is something that applies really well in the bodybuilding like context. Like
Mhm.
that is, I think, one of the training modalities that really well utilizes the pump, because it's the entire point
Yeah.
to like promote hypertrophy and get the blood flow and all that. I've been experimenting with some other like lifting modalities. So I was experimenting with the system of frequent submaximal lifting, such that I would lift my like 70% max for 3 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 5 or something. Do that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then do like my 80% max the next week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then my 90% for just 3 sets of 3 or something. And the intention here was to be leaving like reps in the tank, not necessarily going to or near failure, but just doing a specific amount. So kind of like practicing strength as opposed to, or practicing a specific amount of strength rather than practicing near maximal strength. It's just a different modality. I'm not doing that right now because I'm adding in more specificity for my training to do some upcoming little adventures and plans I've got coming up. But I don't want to stray too far away from the
Yeah.
bounds.
Yeah. So one other
Cheat
thing
curls.
uh that motivates. So there's for me there's like the pump that's very motivating, and then
Mm,
there's like the numbers, watching the
mm,
weights go up. And that's more achievable or more fun when it's like in a powerlifting context of like
mm,
what is the most you can lift, like
mm,
what's your one rep max. I don't know about you, but that's where I get the most
mm,
enjoyment, is like literally seeing like, oh, I squatted this much last week and today I just squatted this much and it's
mm,
more.
mm.
um
Numbers go up. That's why I loved RuneScape when I was when I was a
yeah,
little bit younger.
so it's hard to it's harder for me to motivate myself into those types of
Mm,
routines where it's just like do this much for
mm.
this much. I
Well,
kind of like
yeah.
the like going into the gym and not really knowing.
Yeah, that's a fun aspect. So training like at or near failure, not just with strength, but also with like calisthenics or like running.
Yeah.
That is a good method of. So I guess we have when it comes to training, just in all forms of training, there is base building and there is like conditioning or peaking or something like that. It's like on one end of the spectrum you have base building, on the other end you have peaking. So with running, so zone 2 just building the aerobic capacity, and then zone 4 and 5 is when you build your tempo run pace or your like sprinting pace. And if you think of I recall that you've done marathon training before and completed marathon.
Mhm.
What was your time?
Nothing to brag about. I did like a 4:16 and then a 4:50 and then a 4:15.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you've done 3 at this point.
Yeah.
Actually, what is that, like 78 miles?
78 miles,
Yeah.
something like that.
That's a lot of there's just some big sets.
Yeah.
Do 3 sets at 26.
Spread out throughout the year.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, there's also this idea of looking at any like time frame as like a microcosm of like another time frame. That's one of the cool things about running is, we can kind of like make improvements in our like week to week. If I run like an X minute mile now, it's like I can run an X minus 10% mile like next week. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this is awesome. But back to the idea of base building versus peaking, we can peak our base in a relatively short period of time, and that doesn't necessarily indicate that we're making these long-term adaptations. So if you think of getting a pump, if you take a guy that trains moderate intensity, moderate nutrition, then you get him like some, just assuming it's a him, just my own internalized misogyny or something. Um, so if you take like an average person and you like start to train them with more intensity, more volume, better nutrition, whatever, they are going to get a lot of results really quickly, and then that might not necessarily sustain. Like that trajectory might not sustain. There's this idea of like plateaus. So for the last, I guess, so I've ran 2 half marathons. 2 halves don't make a whole, um, which is fun. But yeah, so the running that you do inside of your program is designed around having peak performance on one particular day. It's not necessarily around having peak performance every day, which is where base building kind of comes more into play. So by spamming tempo runs, I was able to get my mile time a little bit lower, especially with what I could sustain. So in my build up to 13, I basically just did exclusively tempo runs, and then for my long runs, then I would like slow down a little bit just because I physically couldn't like sustain that like pace
Right.
and perhaps the heart rate. So just spamming like zone 4 is what I would default to before I knew what like the zones were. Um, and that's awesome for, if I have a specific thing at a specific time, then getting, specifically ready for that. But
How do you keep
um
track of your zones?
I eyeball it. So my watch is the best watch that exists, by the way. This is a Garmin Instinct 2 Solar. It is a smartwatch that looks like a dumb watch that has GPS, heart rate. It has sleep tracking. It's got notifications, and it has a 28-day battery, and it's got GPS
Is the
and
heart rate good?
heart rate
Heart rate
good.
monitoring?
It is better than not having a heart rate in terms of the precision,
Hmm.
and it is better in than a heart rate monitor in terms of accuracy, given that I don't have to worry about it, or rather, in consistency. Rather,
Oh, consistency. Okay.
consistency is the easiest and perhaps largest way of achieving accuracy. Accuracy being, are you hitting the right target? Precision being, how tight are your groups? Precision being like, parallel there is precision is like perfection, whereas accuracy is like excellence. Which of these things do we want?
Yeah, I notice with mine that there are some times where like I'm doing something and I know my heart rate is high, and then I look
Mm.
and it's like 100.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't really trust mine,
Well,
and that's
it's
why I ask.
weird. Like the thing with heart rate is like sometimes it feels like my heart's not beating fast, but it's beating hard. It's like if my
It's a good
veins
point
just like
too.
got bigger.
Is that it? Does your heart beat harder? Is that a thing?
It feels like it sometimes. I don't know. It's like I guess with any flow, or I guess your heart as an engine, so it's got like the amount of like volume per beat. There's like the force per beat, and there's like the rate, like how often
Right.
it's beating. But I
So
don't know.
that force, does that change?
Does that force change? I don't know. I really don't
Interesting
know.
question though.
It's
But
like
I think
I
that
could see
that
a
is an
case for
adaptation
either
though.
or.
It's like your heart gets better at pumping. It pumps more blood.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing is like what does better mean? So for example, like lower intensity, higher volume, like zone 2 training. I think that is more volume per beat, and then higher intensity is stronger beats, or like the ability to like beat faster or something. So it's kind of like the lower zone is kind of improving the balloon size, whereas the higher zone is like how quickly that can like empty, how strong, or with what strength, because the heart is a muscle.
Right, I see.
If I recall, that's it. That might be inaccurate, but
Yeah, I definitely know that the if you do a lot of zone 2, your resting heart rate will drop. It
mm,
goes down a lot. And I've noticed that myself, that it's been lower at certain points
mm.
and higher at others.
Something that's crazy. From doing like a lot of like tempo runs. I don't have a huge background in like zone 2. I've done a decent amount of zone 3, but that was more of like the middle portion of this year. Um, my resting heart rate would get pretty low, but my heart rate variability would be also low. So indicating that my sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems were out of whack. So with that
And that was
probably,
from doing zone 2.
I think that's just being like a stressed out individual and not knowing how to like regulate stress and like
Yeah.
emotions and like the bodily sensations and just body awareness. But that's a little bit of a different topic, but it's related.
I've heard there are certain, like, if you just focus on your breathing for like a minute and taking like really slow inhales and really slow exhales, that increases your HRV.
Mm.
I don't know
Mm.
enough about that stuff though. I
I know
should
very little, but that's the whole.
research more, but
That's where bro science kind of comes
yeah.
in, because it's like you can just like repeat the opinions of like the most jacked or like fast or smart or whatever person that you've interacted with, and then just like kind of take these
Yes, that's
things.
probably true.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah. There's beautiful, like I guess like a trichotomy, like a spectrum, where it's like on one hand you have empirical science, things that we know for a fact we're able to measure and reproduce, and then you have pseudoscience, which is things that kind of make sense, but it's like kind of kind of woo. So like the crystals and chakras and all that, which I'm into, by the way. And then bro science is like, okay, what works? Like, does this have to have been proven to be true by this authority, or can I, delegate that authority to some other like figure or book or
Right.
concept, or even to myself? It's like, does it have to be something that is universally agreed upon? And a lot of times we don't need empirical evidence in order to be successful, but we do need some metric for, metric for what success is, but being able to kind of take science and then build upon it.
Yeah. When have you failed in the past?
When have I failed in the past? I failed today by not maintaining perfect control over my breath. So that little sigh that I did, I have this little game that I play where I see how long into a day does it, or how quickly can I take my first deliberate breath of the day. And I don't mean just a breath that is deliberate. I'm digging myself into a hole. I mean like that is a deliberate breath. Like, I really don't know how to, rather, I'm not at this time prepared to quantify what does it mean to do something intentionally or not. So I'm just going to leave that. I'm not going to pull that thread yet, but um, yeah, I want to talk about like a breathing practice, but I don't want to stray too far away from the question. But yes, that's an example. I wanted to find something that was today on a longer time frame. Something that's popping up for me is relationships. I've failed at understanding my desires and boundaries and being able to communicate that. I failed at courage by knowing what my boundaries and desires are and communicating that in perhaps subversive ways or non-transparent ways, because selfishly I didn't want to like hurt the other person, or I didn't want to risk I don't want to lose this other person, so I'm going to pretend my needs and desires are not what they are in order to not risk losing this other person, is what that is. And that's a combination of lying to self, definitely lying to self, and also lying to others. Because like if you do one, then you're also doing the other. But this comes back into awareness: is am I lying, or am I just wrong? Like am I just incorrect? And I mean, failure is typically on focused on the being incorrect piece. I do think consciously lying is very often a failure. That is a what I would call a moral failure. That is, yeah. There are a finite number of, okay, I'll make this general to the human experience. There are a finite number of contexts in which we are willing to lie, in which we're willing to consciously lie. And I judge that it is a virtue to try to reduce the number of contexts. So for me, I really appreciate the truth. I often appreciate the truth, and there are contexts where I don't appreciate the truth, but I want to limit the number of those. I really only have a few things in a few situations that I'm willing to lie about so far, because telling the truth, it takes strength, it takes courage, it takes surrender. It takes both willpower and surrender. So it's this kind of like, oh my God, do I have the strength to even do this uncomfortable thing? And can I accept the fact that my truth might not be accepted? I might be, viewed in a negative light for like telling the truth. So that's a little tangent on truth, but within failures, it's like, um, I the biggest failures are, or the most hurtful, most I don't know if damaging is the right word, but some of the highest profile failures are the ones that take a long time and in which I deny the fact that I did fail. So it's kind of like, oh, I didn't fail because I didn't make up any rules. I'm not losing the game because we're not playing a game. Just like most of my problems actually tie back to a resistance to accept and an avoidance of aspects of reality. And that's something I'm very excited to continue exploring.
Yeah. Have you been able to uncover those
A little bit.
with time?
I Something I've been looking at lately is how, yeah, it's the nature of desire. That's what I think most things boil down to. There's this. This is getting serious. I'm gonna sit up a little bit. There is this idea that it is all love. Just very simple blanket statement. It is all
It's all love.
love. So if we take that as a concrete universal truth, if there is a thing, if there is an it, then it is by definition love. So how can we take this thing that doesn't on the surface level appear to be love, and how can we tie it back to love? a really good example of this, because examples are a pretty easy way to communicate.
Can I ask before
Yeah,
we get
let's
into
do
it,
it.
what is why are we believing this blanket statement? What's the backing?
So it's more of so
Or is it
my
like,
my
let's
why
try
is
it?
because it's fun to like try on ideas. I'm a big fan of, can I try this idea on and see how it fits? Can
That's kind of
I?
like the Albert Einstein method. Like he was like, I kind of feel like this is true, so I'm just gonna see if I can figure it out.
Yeah,
And he did.
if this were true, what other things would have to be true in order to support this thing being true?
Okay, so continue.
Yeah.
So we're gonna assume this.
But I mean, so this wasn't like a thing that was like, oh, I heard other people say this, I'm going to try to find a way to, how can I understand? This was not like a scholastic pursuit or anything. I derived this conclusion just from looking at aspects of life or reality or whatever. And I was like, oh, I wonder if that's true. It's true this time. I wonder if it's true all times. Um, but the example here is, if you imagine like a parent, and the kid like sneaks out and they like take the car for like a joyride with their friends, and they get like pulled over, or they get into like an accident or something, and the parents like like very very angry. They're not angry just for the sake of being angry. They're angry because they're afraid. They're afraid because they saw a risk in losing something that they love. And they love the things that they love. By definition, love is love. So in this case, the anger is very directly related to the love that the parent has for the child. And we can extrapolate that as I want to get into suffering, but probably when it feels a little bit more organic to do so. But yeah,
We can get
that's
into
an
it.
idea. Yeah,
So
I would love to.
is it a continuation, or do you want to tie that off?
Mm,
This idea that most things are done from a place of almost like fear of losing the things we love, it seems.
Sort of. Oh yeah. So resistance and avoidance. I do think there's a little more juice in this orange. Um, I can't necessarily say that most things are done from that. I can't necessarily say that most things are done from a deficit mentality. There are some things that are like abundance mentalities, some things that are deficit mentalities. So, am I playing music because I love to do so and I love to make people happy, or am I doing this because, oh, I need to make $20 in tips in order to make it home or whatever? I don't know. So there's this within any desire, there is a, if we look at this, okay, so let's set up a dichotomy between love and suffering. We can have some desires that are seeking love, and some desires that are avoiding suffering, and a lot of things are a combination of both. There's this classic Chris Williamson example that I hear him basically every time I do a podcast, where there's like a mouse in a tube, and you can put like the smell of cheese in the front, or like the smell of cat in the back, and it just like measures. And motivation is often a hybrid of desiring in the positive direction, and then desiring in the negative direction, wanting to get away from something. Where do you feel like a lot of your motivations are? Like,
It's always been from the cat.
yeah, same. Yeah.
And yeah, I've been trying to, the past maybe 6 months to a year, like trying to change fuel sources and become more positively driven. Where it's like, I'm doing this because there's an end state that I want to get to, not because like I'm trying to just avoid that thing. And I think it is, the avoidance is powerful, but it lacks direction that the positive motivation has.
Ooh, that's cool.
Because if you were trying to avoid a state, you're not focused on where you're going. You're not like, oh, I want to get to this thing, I want to get to this. So you just end up somewhere that's not that. And what does that mean? It's like, if you're like, oh, I don't want to be fat, and so you just go and like run forever, and then you're like, okay, well now I like I just run now, but I'm not like happy. This isn't what I wanted. Maybe what I wanted was like a balanced life where I do these things and I eat well. But if you're just focusing on avoiding that one thing, you lose control over where you're going.
Yeah, like back to the gym thing. It's like if you have done enough introspection and self insight to know that, oh, I want to feel attracted, I want to, feel desired by other people, then that is kind of like the love based approach. Whereas like, oh, I just don't like how I feel, and making an observation, oh, I don't like how I feel, and make this observation, I see this attribute about myself, so I'm just going to try to like remove that attribute.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be like a deficit thing, is like either too fat or not enough muscle or something like that.
Yeah.
It's wild how interconnected all these ideas are.
So I think for sure I've always been in the avoidance boat. It's like I'm trying to avoid something and not be some way. And that is what drives me. Or I fear something. And so a lot of the times it's actually that I fear myself. I fear the way I will treat myself if I don't do this thing.
Is there I'm curious about that. So the fear of yourself and fear of treating the self, is there any option to not treat yourself that way and to remove that as a motivator? Is that an option?
That's been the game I've been playing or trying to play.
Yeah.
Is how do I be nice to myself in either case? And honestly, one of the hard realizations is that was actually a good motivator. Because you want to be like, oh, only like butterflies and that's what works. But like that stuff did work. That got me moving. So I've had to, I don't know, I'm kind of in a period of like not being as motivated as I have been in the past. But I think it's a cost of switching fuels. I think that's what's happening. I don't know yet because I'm not out of it. So
there is so you're never going to be out of it. There's a lot of wisdom in that way of framing. There's a lot of wisdom in that modeling. When what I was asking earlier is it was kind of a bait and you didn't really fall for it. Like you're able to like I was trying to, okay, so there's this so just about every dichotomy is a false dichotomy. If we treat things as an either or, it's like we don't necessarily have to do that, but that's just a very valuable way of getting an initial understanding. Right, wrong, good, and bad. These things don't actually exist, sort of. But we just tell kids that, oh, it is bad to punch your friend Timmy in the face, just to kind of influence behavior. But the trap that I was trying to set up is this false dichotomy between like negativity and positivity, or like this treating change, treating desire as if it was a bad thing. So treating it like I can either accept where I'm at or I can move towards this other thing, and treating it like I can only do one of these things. And the actual bait there was like, oh, can you just accept where you're at? Can you not don't worry about having goals. You don't need to do anything. You're fine just as you are, which is true. But part of that binary way of looking at things is that's a starting point. That is not where we leave it. Right. We need to make these, by my judgment, we need to make these binary judgment calls in order to just get out of the analysis by paralysis. And I don't just mean like this, I need to make a conscious decision, but to just get whatever the initial action is here. So the action here is not being unnecessarily unkind to the self. That's one piece. And then another need is our needs or desires or whatever. So it's a both. Most things are a both. Something that I've been getting into tantric philosophy a little bit lately, which is very fascinating. I thought that it was like, before I got into it, I thought, oh, this is just sex yoga. But it's like There's so much to it. I'm not going to try to like define tantra right now, but it's a fascinating way of looking at like energy and the world and life and all of these things. But there's this idea that it is not either or, it is both and more. So that ties back into the dichotomy thing of like how far do we have to zoom out in order for both of these things to be true? How far out do we have to zoom from black and white before we can start seeing shades of gray, before we can start seeing the reds and the yellows? And yeah, it's just this process of, either accepting that, there is a paradox, accepting that, oh, I need to accept myself and I need to have desires and, exert willpower and, meet goals and do things. I need to do these things, but also they're conflicting. And can I just endure the fact that this is a paradox and that I need to do both of these things that are seemingly mutually exclusive, until I gain the wisdom and perspective and insight to recognize, oh, actually, here's the nuance between the two things. I think ultimately nuance is the landing point that allows us to make peace, but accepting that we might not know nuance when we're first learning these things, but it is often valuable to learn things even without the nuance. So
Yeah.
that's a lot, but it's kind of like a, binary duality type of thing. It's kind of like a, we were chatting earlier, I think offline, about what is duality. It is looking at reality, I think, is the biggest word that I know. Yeah, reality as being two separate things instead of one thing. And by adding that contrast, that allows us to look at things through a lens of, polarity, and I already used the word contrast, but contrast. And it allows us to compare things. If it's all the same thing, it's like it is just a thing. It's not as interesting. So if you put it into two things, it's like, oh, cool, this thing is a little bit different than that thing. Which is, there are some philosophies that we as humans we are an instance of, if there's some giant cosmic being, so let's call it source energy or God or some great spirit that is this oneness, this infinite being that chose to fragment itself into pieces such that it could experience what it's like to not be one. What is it like to feel different than something else? What is it like to feel alone and isolated and disconnected? So that's a cool idea. And yeah, I'm curious kind of where your head's at. And like I recognize I have this behavior in which I love to take the thing and then just like get into these like little flow states. And I often like to do that, or I often have a tendency to do that alone. And yeah, I have a little bit of like, oh man, it's disrespectful to do that without like consent. And it's like you got to check if the other person's like following you along, and just, social
It's fun.
skills.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
I was gonna say, so just tying back to where you were right before.
Mm.
I think you mentioned earlier about avoidance in your past.
Mm.
And so I think there is it's almost like the acceptance of where you're at is like the first step, because you have to become fully like, this is where I am. This is the way things are. I can't do anything about this right now. I can't change the past. This is where I'm at. Like, this is the playing field. And like, before you do that, you can't really effectively do anything.
Right.
And so that part is necessary, but then it's also like, that doesn't mean you're accepting that this is the way things have to be from now on.
Yeah, man, I'm loving this. It's like there it's a very attractive idea. So in the pursuit of wisdom, we acquire knowledge, and we use our discernment in order to identify which knowledge is valuable and which is not, which knowledge is useful. And that's kind of how I define wisdom, as, useful knowledge. And with the analysis by paralysis thing, it's like we can look at all this information and it's like, oh shit, this is true and that's true. You got to be strong and flexible. I don't know what to do, and use that to justify, like using that lack of certainty to justify a lack of action, which is often not valuable to do. It can be fun to do. It's like just doing like a thought exercise, but it's back to feedback loops. We can make these very big decisions that have lots of factors involved and take a long time, and there's a lot of investment, or we can make like 13 smaller decisions in that same time frame. And that ties back into avoidance, this avoidance of doing the wrong thing. Like the desire to be good often has the shadow of desiring to be not bad. Oh, I don't want to be bad. I don't want to be wrong. Any of these things. And a lot of times, if we see the fact that something does have nuance to it, or I guess me, but I think this is a pretty general feeling. It's like if we see the nuance, then we want to understand, make the full correct decision instead of, okay, I'm willing to be wrong, so I am going to take this risk. I'm going to accept whatever possible like consequences or consequence. Yeah, we can call it consequence. Consequence is just a result of an action, but it has a negative connotation to it. So rather than the word consequence, I'm going to say results. I accept the results for my action, whatever they are. There's a theme of ownership and accountability of I accept this for what it is, regardless of any judgments that I might place on it or that other people might place on it. And a lot of times my own avoidance has stemmed from a lot of the more like negative emotions. There are no actual like bad emotions. They're just, some things are more uncomfortable. So all of these things tie into suffering. When we avoid something, it is because it is uncomfortable. That is the I think one of the most basic definitions that we can give for avoidance is avoiding. I'm gonna define the word avoidance with the word avoidance, so that's kind of cheating, but I'm gonna do it anyway. But avoidance is rooted in avoiding discomfort, and if you imagine like a magnet, um, the polar ends of a magnet, they just like link up together. They're very comfortable and they're attracted to each other. And then the same ends of the magnet, they like repel each other. They avoid each other. Um, a lot of times that's or I think all the time, most of the time, all the time. We can't say only the Sith deal in absolutes, but anyway, so this is all rooted in avoiding discomfort. When discomfort is above a certain threshold, it becomes pain. When pain is above a certain threshold, it becomes suffering. So discomfort itself is not inherently suffering, but it is a precursor to suffering. And when we avoid things, it is when I think that we're making a subconscious bet that the thing that we're avoiding is suffering, which is ultimately the thing that we're trying to not do is suffer. And I think there's a lot of like power in suffering as well, which I'm gonna table for now.
So you put these on, was this on a sliding scale? I couldn't understand that part. The discomfort, pain, suffering.
Yes, yeah. Like suffering is the infinite. Okay, so yeah, so let's say you have baseline, and this is like the suffering axis, where it's like you can measure so it's like discomfort is measured up, suffering is kind of measured down. The analogy doesn't really like work too well, but they're both the same thing. It's discomfort is one way to look at it. If you have extreme discomfort, that can be suffering, but at one point, does discomfort come suffering? Does discomfort have to cause pain in order to be suffering? And then it's like, okay, what is pain? Pain is a sensation. Discomfort is also a sensation. Like pain, for example, doesn't necessarily need a physical stimulus. Discomfort doesn't need a physical stimulus. It's just how we interpret something. So if you think of the difference between a situation and a problem, I've thought through this a little bit. I'm curious, to see just how you react to this idea or respond to this idea on the fly. Like, what do you think the difference is in a situation and a problem?
A situation and a problem. Mm, I guess a problem is something that there is um, there's an implication of a solution that is something to be solved, whereas a situation is simply exists.
So kind of like a situation is just being, and a problem is
Demanding
doing.
action somehow.
Yeah, I love this duality, that this dichotomy between being and doing. A situation is a state of things. A problem is when there is both a current state and a desired end state.
So
And
going off that,
yeah,
the connection I'm making here, which might not be where you're going, pain is the being, suffering is the doing.
pain is being,
Because
suffering is the
I see these
doing. That's not the direction I'm going, but I'm curious to hear
I
more.
see pain and suffering as two inherently different things.
Okay.
Like pain is a physical sensation. Suffering is an attitude towards maybe pain, maybe not. What the way I think of it, I think I heard this from like Sam Harris or some kind of like um, interpretation of Buddhism, which is that suffering is a rejection of what is,
Hmm.
and that could actually be positive or negative. So it could be, I don't want to feel pain, and so I'm going to try and push away the feeling of pain. And it also could be, this feels good, and I'm going to try and cling to it. I'm going to try and make this last longer. And in doing that, you end up actually suffering rather than accepting fully what is. And so from that, that's where I'm thinking of this doing. Suffering feels more like a doing. It's like I'm trying to push things away or keep them rather than just letting them be.
Interesting. I immediate response to that is that suffering is an attachment to doing. I like the nuance that you're introducing between pain and suffering. I don't think that pain necessarily even needs to be in the picture. We can treat it as like a thing. So there are some scopes in which pain and suffering are related, and some scopes where they can exist independently. One scope is in back to like the desire and suffering. If you look at suffering as the presence of desire, so there in Buddhist philosophy there are the Four Noble Truths, which is, I don't know them in detail, but to effect they are, or in effect they are, suffering is an aspect of life. So suffering exists. So it's suffering exists. The cause of suffering is in desire. It is possible to transcend suffering, reach enlightenment, and we can reach enlightenment by letting go of desires. And there's like the implication of or not necessarily an implication of reincarnation, but there's like a connotation of reincarnation, but we can table that for now. Anyway, suffering is alleviated by satisfying desires. Desires are satisfied by either meeting the original desire or in letting go of it. So back to the situation versus problem example. A situation is just a state. A problem is when there are two states that exist. There's current state and desired state. And the degree of suffering, back to the positive and negative example, I think that's a pretty cool tool to use. Um, the bigger the gap between these two things is, the greater degree of suffering that is not just that it's possible, that exists. So we can look at it as acceptance as like the point. Hmm. Hmm. I don't know, but I'll put a pin in that briefly. But to tie back, I do think that suffering is ultimately caused by a lack of acceptance, and acceptance is the thing that is, um, I guess, referenced by like the path of like surrender and letting go.
Is
There's a
acceptance
lot
the
there.
opposite of desire? Are these two different?
Mm,
Like, are these two different ends of the
hmm.
spectrum?
Is acceptance the opposite of desire? Uh, in some contexts, yes. I'd say a lot of the time, even, perhaps most of the time, yes. And a lot of times, saying most of the time is good enough as saying always. We rarely say always, but then like always only exists within a certain context. Is there anything that is always true outside of every context? And there's this concept of infinity, but not right now. But yeah, so desire and acceptance. Yeah, those are, we can look at these things as mutually exclusive. So there is, in philosophy, there is a path of will and there is a path of surrender. We can also look at that as the path of desire and the path of acceptance. If I were to physically have zero desires and perfect acceptance, my life on this planet would end pretty dang quickly. I would not like eat food or drink water. I would not have any kind of motivations. Ultimately, our vitality is something that is determined by our willpower, the amount of fire in our belly, not necessarily by the amount of surrender in our heart or in our head or spirit or whatever. And the whole thing there is, it is both and more. Like, we can look at these two things as a dichotomy, but or and with any dichotomy, it's like, how can they both be true? So a strategy or belief system or whatever that is generally pretty fruitful is having both of these two things be true at the same time. Can I learn to exercise my willpower of the things that I can influence while also learning to accept things that I cannot? These two things are not mutually exclusive. Can I start at point A and work myself outward while also starting at B and working backward? Can I start at point A and just try to get away from point A while also trying to figure out a path from point B back to point A? It's like we can do both of these things, and we can only really look at one thing at a time. So we very quickly oscillate, and the whole thing with like context switching is like we trust that the context will still be there whenever we switch back into it. And the more that we can trust and surrender, the greater freedom that we have to do these explorations and get away from the known. It's like, in order to jump onto that next branch, we have to let go of the current branch. We have to be willing to let go, and in order to let go, we have to have trust, which is the ultimate thing. Trust is the skill that contributes toward the attribute of surrender or acceptance or letting go. I think acceptance is probably the best word that I can use there, at least right now.
Do you believe in a God?
Do I believe in a God? I'm happy that you asked, because it's like that was one of my like back pocket questions. I was gonna like, we'd be just like shooting the shit. I'd be like, yeah, do you believe in God? I think I saw it on the Eric Andre show. I do believe in God. Um, I have no idea what that means. I'm not going to pretend to know what it means, but I know a little bit of what it means to me, which is a little bit of my it's a combination of confidence, humility, and arrogance. So it's kind of like, humility is the antidote to arrogance, and confidence is the antidote to humility. And well, what is arrogance? I guess is the antidote to just being fucking stupid or something. I don't know. Yeah, I grew up as a Christian and I became an atheist when I was a teenager while still going to church. So I grew up in small town Alabama, very strong Christian culture. I grew up in a Methodist church, though Southern Baptist was kind of like the cultural flavor of the town that I grew up in. Is majority of that, but they're very very similar in some ways. Um, I remember. I don't think it's fruitful to dive into when I first got away from believing in God, but it was basically the narrative that I grew up with, and at some point I started questioning and I was like, oh, don't actually believe in this. And then there was several years of being an atheist. So I kept going to church for a while, and then once I got to college, it's like I'm just kind of like atheist. I'm just kind of hanging out. I'm a nihilist. I'm just a creature on this planet, but not even having that self awareness to refer to myself as a creature. I was just living and just did not have any kind of awareness of a higher power. I was like kind of agnostic for a while, and fast forwarding a little bit, I have just been exposed to enough ideas, enough feelings, enough perspectives beyond my own that I I'm not even going to say 100%. I an infinite percent believe that there is a higher power. I do believe that it is both conscious and unconscious. It is the ultimate paradox. It is not even an it. Um, Generally, I or the latest that I'm able to the latest nuance that I'm able to share is that there is just this raw like source energy as this infinite ocean, and God is a word that we use to personify source energy such that we're able to easier relate to it. It is a human trait to relate to other humans. That is just something that is just in our nature. We are designed to relate to each other. Designed by what? Ha. Then below the concept of God, in terms of like abstraction, there's this idea of like spirits, great spirits, holy spirits, whatever. If you keep going down that road, down that road, you land on soul, and there's this idea of like a soul living multiple lifetimes. There is an idea of a soul living one lifetime and then either going to heaven or hell. um and the cool thing here is that there's also like reincarnation is a theme here as well. There's a really cool idea that these different mutually exclusive belief systems can both be true at the same time if you zoom out far enough. So there is the Christian idea of heaven and hell, or the idea that I am aware of as Christian as heaven and hell, where your soul comes into your body and then your body lives this life, and then when your body is done, then there is a binary yes or no decision for are you a good boy, are you a good soul, you want to be come chilling with Jesus, or go
Mhm.
burn for eternity. um that's one concept, and another concept is in this reincarnation, where it's like you live this life and you have this karmic debt, and you either accumulate more or you pay off your karmic debt in this time, or you may be both, because karma doesn't have to be like a linear thing. It can just be this infinite thing. And then you will reincarnate into either a better or worse position. There's one idea that you are rewarded for having a good life by having a better life in the next one. Then there's this idea of like strength training, where by lifting the weight successfully, congratulations, in the next lifetime the weight gets heavier. um, and the beautiful thing about the concept of infinity and eternity is that we can live an infinite number of lives. If there is, like, let's say it is true, just for the sake of the idea, that a soul is a thing that is possible, that is able to live like multiple lives in order to like learn or experience or whatever. The soul can live an infinite number of lives. The soul can live like my life and your life. It is possible that we have one soul that is living every life. It is possible that one soul is living just like five lives. Maybe a single soul lives like three lifetimes in order to learn about gratitude in one lifetime, and then about like anger in another lifetime, and to experience some other third thing just for the rule of threes. And then it moves on into something else. So there's one idea in which a soul lives a finite amount of life. Then there's another idea that a soul lives an infinite number of lives. But what if the soul that lives a finite number of lives wraps up into a higher or bigger, it gets absorbed into a more global soul that has lived every number of lives? One way that I guess helps me to wrap my head around this idea is if you imagine like finger puppets, like if I drew like some smiley faces on my fingers, it's like the smiley face is my life, it is my ego. This is Forrest, the creature that is alive on this planet. Then if you wipe the face off, it is now a finger. So this is still like an individual unit kind of energy. This is still in there's still an illusion of individuality, and oh, there's my soul and there's your soul. But then, by zooming out from the face to the finger, we see that, oh, this thing is actually this other thing that was just pretending to be a thing. So what happens if there's my individual soul and your individual soul, and then we zoom out and, oh shit, it's actually part of the same hand? And I generally believe that there is an infinite amount of unfolding that we can do. So unfolding from the puppet to the finger to the multiple fingers to the hand, and oh, I've got two hands. So there's two separate objects, but oh wait, I'm a human. Humans have two hands. These hands are not the thing; they are just a part of the thing. And then there's the aspect of, oh, okay, well, am I the thing, or no, am I just part of the thing? As a human, I am part of a community. I'm part of the human race, the human civilization. I'm a part of Earth. I think Earth is a great parallel to the concept of God, because it is the most tangible thing that we have direct physical access to. It's there is discussion and disagreement around whether God exists. There is much less disagreement about whether the Earth exists, but regardless, it is a shared context in which we all live. And that's kind of the concept of greater power, is just having these like greater and greater contexts, because even then it's like the Earth is separate from the moon, but they're both part of the solar system, which is part of the Milky Way galaxy, which is part of something else bigger. But I'm not actually that studied in astronomy and what is bigger than a galaxy. I don't know. But if you zoom out far enough, we get to the universe, and we can talk about like metaphysics and all that, which is another cool thing. But that's a lot of things. So I'm going to bring that around. Yes, I do believe in God. Who's asking? Yeah. So that's a lot, and I'm curious. How much of these ideas have you heard of, just like perceived before? How much have you like thought about and considered and like chewed on, oh, what if this? And then I guess, belief of like what kind of like sits, if any of that does sit.
Yeah, I have. So I've heard of this. I mean, I've heard of the idea of like consciousness is like an ocean and we're all drops of water. Have you heard that?
I like it.
But short answer, I don't believe in God. I'm like the atheist 100%. I just found the term physicalism, which I was like, that's me. That's it. So I'm very much like, I think is it Occam's razor?
The most likely thing is the thing that happens.
The most likely thing is what is it? The least complicated, something like that.
Yeah, like
The
it's like
easiest explanation
the simplest.
is the most likely.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. That's the way I see it. I'm like, I don't see a reason that I haven't experienced anything that says like, oh, there must be something higher.
Yeah.
Everything seems to have a simpler solution if I just go with the physical.
Yeah. To clarify, is so if you're aware, is your current belief that you have not seen evidence, therefore you don't believe? Okay, so so is it more of like this doesn't exist, or I have not seen evidence that this exists, so I'm not going to act as though it does?
Yeah, so I can't say it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I would say I believe there's a low probability that it exists. That's the way I would say it. Because I think everybody is on a sliding scale. It's like, I really believe in God. I'm at like 99%, but like no one fully knows.
Yeah,
there's not really a way to know.
That's kind of the thing, is like by the nature of like infinity, we can never fully understand something. Like by trust, we just accept that there is a thing on the other side of like the wall.
And so I'm just very low on that.
Yeah, something I'm very happy hearing. I'm very happy for you that it's is a it can be an asymptotically low percentage, but it is not zero,
Mm.
which I'm really excited about, like, just hearing that because, that means that you have an open mind. That means that there is not concrete poured on your brain. Yeah. No, but
The
that's the
door
thing
is
is,
just
like,
cracked
is
so
it
slightly.
is it 100% correct or is it 99.9% repeating correct? It's like you can round it up to 100 when you need to make a binary, like there is no 100%. There is just a heads or tails. Like we use our discernment in order to round to the nearest binary.
Right.
So it's pretty safe for you to round to that binary. And if you look at just an infinite amount of nuance, there is, like, some part that's at least, open to the possibility. And the fact that it's not zero makes me happy. But also it's like it's not necessarily your responsibility to believe or not believe in any one particular, not even like God, but just in anything. It's like not necessarily my responsibility to solve the Israel Palestine conflict.
Yeah.
It's not my responsibility to solve, Russia and Ukraine. It's like I can contribute that to that, but it's like ultimately not my responsibility. And then you get to what does it mean to be responsible for something? And responsibilities kind of aren't real. They're also an illusion, but
That's a good
not
point.
getting into that.
The catchphrase is like silence is violence. Have you heard this?
I have.
Which is basically saying if you're not active in every single possible thing, like you are contributing to it.
Yeah.
Which I
Is that
take a lot
true
of
or
fault in.
false?
I see a lot of problems in that thinking because that is
Wait, but before problems, is that
yes.
statement true or false?
It could be false. It's not necessarily true because let's say you have a skewed vision of what is true and then you go and try and help and you help in a way that is destructive.
Yeah. I really want you to just like walk into one of these traps and be like, yes, it is always true, or yes, it is always false. But yeah, you're too clever. You're too nimble. You're a nimble
So
mongoose.
it's not necessarily true, I would
Hmm.
say.
Hmm.
Um, but what it is asking is it is asking people to spread themselves thin because there are certain people. This is another thing I've heard, which is like you shouldn't volunteer because the idea is okay, you could go volunteer somewhere, put in your work here where it's worth this much money, or you could work here
To
where
get the
your money is
money
worth your
to,
time is worth much more, and
yeah,
then pay someone to do that.
yeah.
It's that idea of like you should be focusing where you're most valuable,
Hmm.
and that might mean ignoring something and not, and that sucks, but
Hmm.
you have to accept your limits and then also find where can I contribute the most and be the
Hmm.
most helpful.
Well, that's kind of the thing is like we don't necessarily have to accept our limits. It's like we can often it is often like the right thing to do, but there one thing is the more I see, the less I know. One thing that I'm becoming increasingly an idea that I'm becoming increasingly aligned with is like how little certainty that I can have in anything. Like, what does it mean to actually know something? Like, if I see like a dragon fly across the sky right now, like I can know that I experienced it, but can I know that the dragon was actually there? It's like, is it there? Do I have schizophrenia? Did I project that? It's like there is not really a way of knowing. Like, the only way that we're able to actually know something is, with trust of our perceptions, trust that we're able to think of things, or like physically, like see and like sense things. But
Mhm.
ultimately, knowing things comes down to trusting our senses, not just our physical senses, but just our anything, trusting our awareness, I think, is good way to phrase that. But I mean, the silence being violence things is like that is sometimes true and that is sometimes not true. Like, coming back into maximizing impact, what if what if it feels really good to the individual to be directly hands-on, interacting with, building care packages for the Ukrainian troops, or just whatever things that people tend to do. Um, I will very often resist when other people or groups will tell me to feel bad about something, or rather, they say a narrative that leads me to believe that if I accept this narrative, then I should feel bad about something. Tying back to my own selfish desire to avoid discomfort. If I am if I if I take ownership of the fact that there is that something good that I can do, but I did not do it, therefore I did a bad thing. If I can take ownership of that, or rather, if I do take on responsibility of that, I might not be ready to accept that. I might not be ready to accept that. Oh, I donated $100. I could donate 110 and 10 minutes of my time, but why not 11 minutes? Why not 12 minutes? It's like, okay, can I give my entire life to this cause? It's like there is always more that we can do, and it ties back into accepting the nuance of things. There is not a binary good or bad decision that we can make. There is no like right or wrong. There's generally more right and less right. But there is no objectively correct answer. A lot of times we are conditioned to believe that there is an objectively correct thing to do. So by dealing in binary systems, by dealing in logic, for example, by dealing in video games, where if you kill a goblin, the goblin will give you three experience points. You need 30 experience to level up. Therefore, in order to level up, you need to kill exactly 10 goblins, and then there is no uncertainty in that. You know that if you do exactly the set of steps, then you will get exactly this result. I think that conditioning of certainty sets us up to be less prepared to deal with uncertainty in life. There are some things which are pretty certain of, point A definitely leads to point B, but there are other things that point A sometimes leads to point B. Like, like driving, for example. It's like, we trust that this road connects this place to that place, but that's something that's generally accepted to be true. And then we often accept that our car is not going to break down. So when it comes to planning, so if I make a commitment to meet you at a certain place at a certain time, I am trusting the fact that my vehicle will get me there. I'm making an assumption. Pretty much everything could be looked at as an assumption. I think trust is kind of like a conscious assumption. It's like, I believe that this thing will happen, or I believe that this thing is true. Yeah, trust is generally believing that something is true, and making a conscious assumption. An assumption is when we believe something is true, but we don't have like consciousness behind it. So the whole thing there is not in just don't believe anything's true, nothing's true, everything is a lie. That's not what I'm saying. It's more of, if we can look at our beliefs and gain conscious awareness of them, then we can turn our assumptions into trust without actually having to change any beliefs. But if we have a subconscious belief that we gain awareness of, all of a sudden, I'm not just assuming that my car is going to not break down from point A to point B. I have awareness of that, the fact that is a risk. I can accept the risk and wish to continue, at which point I am trusting that it will not. So rather than say, hey, I'm going to leave at 3 hours ahead of time just in case my car breaks down, I'm going to leave 30 minutes ahead of time, because it's like, that's probably how long it takes, plus 5 minutes to walk to my car, or like put on my seatbelt or whatever. That's kind of the thing, is like, we are able to drastically change our positions without actually having to do anything besides gain awareness and accepting the things in our lives, by accepting that we are making assumptions like, oh man, I was wrong for that, or oh, I was ignorant. It's kind of like, there's this there's a spectrum, there's a dichotomy between ignorance and awareness, or ignorance and consciousness. And the whole thing is like, there is a balance to be found when we are able to get conscious enough to gain awareness and make choices and influence behavior or whatever, but not so conscious that we are aware of all of the, problems. I'm using the word problems very specifically here. That we're not aware of all of these problems, that we don't have the power, means, resources to influence. Like, when we are aware of a problem, then that is something that takes up a slice of our consciousness. And when we have problems that are not solvable, that is by definition suffering, sort of. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, because a problem implies desire, and desire implies suffering. So if we can, I think there is a skill in gaining awareness of situations and learning to detach from the desire that turns those situations into problems, then the problems promote suffering. A lot of times when the silence is violence things, people might, um, I do think that is true. By being silent, by not promoting whatever needs to be promoted, I'm contributing to this thing. It's like the opposite of a thing is the same as, or the absence of a thing can be the opposite of another thing. But it's kind of a half-baked idea. I'm not going to dive into that right now. But anyway, silence is violence. And can I accept that fact is the whole thing. And if I am not prepared to accept that, I might say, no, actually, that has nothing to do with me. That's not my responsibility. So can we take, I guess another way of phrasing it is, can we take ownership of something that we're not ready to be responsible for? Can I take ownership of there's some contrived example that I can make, but I'm gonna try to keep it on point. But yeah, can I take ownership of the fact that I am not contributing to solving world hunger? Can I take ownership of that fact while also I'm not ready to be responsible for actually doing a thing? Can I accept this as a situation without necessarily changing it? So I don't know. There's ideas, like there's I love looking at how these things interrelate to each other, and yeah, the whole like suffering and desire piece, and then ownership and accountability, and the whole thing with awareness is, if we get too much awareness, that can lead to getting ungrounded, just whatever that means. And generally, grounding is in accepting the presence and not being too far into something that is not the present. So not just the past or the future, but also the abstract, the crazy, and the weird. Grounding is, so it is often valuable to do that exploration, but it's also often valuable to remain grounded. So for example, for the past probably 6 or 7 minutes, I'm exploring all of these ideas, but I lost awareness of the fact that I'm sitting in this room with you, Will, another person. It's like we are our ideas, and we are also not our ideas. We are this infinite global consciousness, and we're also these individual things. But the whole thing is, we don't even necessarily need to reconcile that fact, or rather, one way to reconcile that fact is we have eternity to explore these ideas and to think these thoughts, and to all of these infinite lifetimes. And oh my god, infinite lifetimes means infinite pain and suffering. It's like, yes, but it doesn't really matter, because something that we do know is that we are right here right now. We exist, and that is fact. We exist because we are able to perceive. We exist because we have a concept of I am. It's like, what does that even mean? Just the concept. So the fact that we are able to perceive means that we exist. And if that is a thing, then all we have to, or if that is a prior condition, then all that we have to do is kind of keep existing. We don't actually have to do anything. We don't really have to keep existing. There's no obligation there. But something that I firmly believe is that we do kind of have a responsibility to, as humans, keep living. Yeah, this is perhaps my most authoritative. I'm a little bit nervous to say this, but perhaps my most authoritative stance is, you do not have my permission to kill yourself. It is your responsibility to suffer, and it is possible that the suffering just exceeds capacity too much. And I pray that I never have to kill myself. I pray that I never suffer that much. I pray that no one else does either. But I also recognize that that is just part of the process. I pretty firmly believe that this life is not all there is to it, and any suffering that I'm experiencing in this life will carry over into the next life. So it's not like, oh, the world loves me or the world loves you, and it's a better place with you in it. Those things are true 100%, but I literally think that there is just no point to killing yourself, because any suffering that is unresolved in this life is going to continue. Beatings will continue until morale improves. Kind of like that joke, but on this like existential level. And that's where I think the concepts of reincarnation come into play. There's an infinite amount of suffering, and in order to transcend it, we have to accept it. There's this idea that a coward dies 1,000 deaths. So what if I have to reincarnate 1,000 times until I can accept the fact that I am going to die? What does it mean to have death with dignity? What does it mean to, any of these things? But this is kind of a lot. But if I could, boil all of this down into one takeaway, is like, do not kill yourself. There is no point. It is possible to transcend suffering. The way that we transcend suffering is to love it, is to feel grateful for it. Not just to endure it, or not just something to run away, but recognizing that the opportunity to suffer is the opportunity to live and experience desire, and to laugh and play and dance and all these things. And coming back to the idea where it's all love, that idea, it's all love, was a byproduct of some reflections that I've been doing on suffering. So I have this little game that I play, coming back into like Forrest Richardson, the human being on this planet. I have this game that I like to play of, how long do I have to suffer before I can recognize and gain awareness of the fact that I am suffering? And then once I do that, how long can I, or how quickly can I feel grateful for the suffering? Getting stuck in this, oh man, I've got this decision to make, and I'm, feel like I'm too fat and too lazy, and I'm not tough enough to do this thing. There's people that depend on me, and like this little thing. So that is like a physical example of like suffering or whatever. But how long does it take me to get back to, oh shit, these are some pretty cool problems. Like, not just in life, could there be, worse problems? I don't even have to be alive. Like, the fact that I exist at all is this incredible gift. The fact that I, as an ego, just because there's like layers to the self. Anyway, yeah, given the choice between existing and not existing, I judge that it is a good thing to exist. There's infinite love, there is infinite goodness, and yeah, don't really have a thesis statement, but there's some pretty heavy ideas, which gets me into like what I'm currently doing is learning how to embrace struggle, which is the most root activity, the most root sensation, the most root experience, the most root concept in the path of will. So in the path of will and the path of surrender, these are both beautiful things, and we need to be doing both. And the day that I stop struggling is the day that I stop willpower, is the day that I stop having a will to live. So on the infinite timeline, my soul doesn't necessarily need like the willpower and the surrender. I mean, it kind of does, but and I recognize I'm starting to get kind of scattered, so I'm going to bring it back a little bit. But part of my life mission is, to what degree can I suffer and still maintain the willpower to live? So it's a combination of like low key suffering and high key suffering. And my prayer, my request is that I never suffer so much that I wish to die, and that if I do, that it not be granted. Like, if I ever suffer so much that I'm like asking for death or like begging for death, my prayer is that it is not given to me, and that I keep suffering, because that's more experiencing life, and that is more love at the end of the day. So how was your weekend?
What does your dream life look like?
The dream life, oh shit. Oh fuck. Self-actualization is the name of the game. I'm a big fan of models. I'm a big fan of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where at the base level we have survival, and there's like our like esteem and social needs and all these things up until self-actualization. How can we transcend, so to speak? My goals are to, one, don't die, and two, learn some cool stuff. Given the fact that I generally believe in reincarnation, I I think it's really fun to look at life as like a high score thing. Like, can I treat Forrest individual ego as if he is a character in a video game and trying to get the high score? So it's a combination of enlightenment and transcending. That is a goal, but that is predicated on survival, and that's why it's so freaking important to ground in not just reality, but ground in life, ground in this body. Can I take a breath? Cool. I'm still alive, so I don't have to worry, I don't have to suffer. And yeah, so within priorities, top priority is always survival. And then after survival, we can get into like other things and figuring out what those other priorities are. It's like, I think that's part of the beauty in life. So wisdom, general, just to share a little nugget, some guidance that I received in a time that I really needed it, was to be humble, be kind, and to seek wisdom. Notice that those first two are be. The third one is seek, as in a do. So it's kind of like this. You have to focus on what you are before what you do, or something like that. This is not directly related to the whole existential suffering and all of that, but it kind of is. But yeah, just trying to do cool stuff, seeking wisdom.
All right, Forrest Richardson.
Yeah, we did it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Where can people find out more about you?
Find out more about me. I have an Instagram that I use for some stuff. I don't really have like a brand or any like public facing projects. I'm pretty self-centered right now as far as the next things that I'm trying to do. I have a desire to if I could ever be an astronaut, that would be freaking dope. And I recognize that desire pretty recently, and that's kind of my North Star. So yeah, Instagram at the number 4 period IST, because my name is Forrest. I'm clever. And beyond that, I'm just generally around. I do stuff. I run, looking for allies, looking for friends, looking for challengers, looking for mentors, looking for mentees. If I kind of zone out from the fact that other people might listen to this, hey, cameras, what's up? So if any of this resonates, speaking to the audience, if you want help, reach out. I love to help. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to serve. And yeah, just thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.